This is the Extra Point Podcast. During this podcast, we will dive deeper into our Sunday teaching and share practical next steps for your faith journey. Now, let's kick off the Extra Point.
Well, hello and welcome to the Extra Point Podcast. I'm Jessica Beha. I'm the children's pastor here at Southridge Church, and we're joined today with Pastor Cheryl. And before we go any further, we want you to go ahead and like and subscribe to this if you have not had a chance. That way that you can make sure you get all the updates and all that kind of stuff when one of our Extra Point podcasts go live. And so today we're joined with Pastor Cheryl, who spoke yesterday. Mm-hmm. And so I want to ask you a question.
Okay.
First and foremost.
Cool.
Was it cake or was it fake?
Most of them were fake. Most of them were a vase.
Okay.
Are you talking about, was the cake vase fake or cake?
Which one was it?
It was the white one in the back with the orange flowers.
Okay.
But people made me feel very good about that. Me and my friends felt much better because it was apparently harder than we expected it to be because we struggled with that. Fashioning cake to look like another object is definitely not as easy as what the shows make it seem.
Well, it's funny when you messaged staff the other day and you were like, does anybody know how to do this? I was like, no, I can't do that. I don't have a clue how to do that.
Unfortunately, our youth intern was not in that chat.
Yeah.
And she actually leads a bake club at school. Mm-hmm. And it just did not occur to my brain. And, but we had fun. Good. And God used it anyway. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yesterday we talked a little bit about more about the kingdom. Mm-hmm. And so I've got a question for you. I actually accidentally just deleted my question here, but let me pull this back up. So my question for you is, we were talking yesterday and we compared Christians to the show It Is Cake, right? Kind of comparing that. Where things look real but aren't always what they seem. What are some ways that we can evaluate whether we are truly living as disciples rather than just looking the part? Like, what are some ways that we can truly evaluate that?
Yeah. So one of the things is really, truly, do your actions match up with your words?
Yeah.
And I know that might seem kind of cliche or like whatever, but they say actions speak louder than words. And I do truly believe that at some point, if you're not doing something that lines up with it, you can say it or look at all you want, but it's not true. Right. And I briefly mentioned, I got into a little bit more actually named where the research came from. But Lifeway did some research on these things, these kind of actions, and what it looks like if somebody is truly living out transformational discipleship. And so they called it the Transformational Discipleship Assessment. Mm-hmm. And they talked about, like, in Christian life, like, or just discipleship, we want to see certain things happen.
Right.
We want, like, it's an expectation, a thing like that we learned a couple weeks ago, that we should be telling people about Christ, but most people don't. We should be serving, but a lot of people don't. We should give, but a lot of people don't. All these things. Well, those are what they consider output goals.
Right.
And so, to get those output goals, those are great goals to have, but you have to have some input goals to see those output goals happen. And so what they talked about was that people who read their Bible more than 5 times a week are way more likely to do some of these things. People who attend church 4 to 5 times a month are much more likely to do these things than people who only attend once a month or less, right. Between those two. People who go to a group, are in some kind of community group, they're much more likely, the more that they go, the more that you're around people. And it's this aspect of we could go and do those things, and we're doing the things, but if it's not transforming you, if it's not changing what you're putting out, then it doesn't really matter.
Right.
But so those things help us, like those things should help influence the output goals, the outward action of those things. But if it's not, you're maybe either not doing it enough, like, to be completely honest, because I think some people are like, oh yeah, I read my Bible. And it's like, oh, I read my Bible when I'm in church. You know what I mean? Like,
so it's funny that you said that, because I don't think I told you this yesterday, but I was telling someone this yesterday. So we started this new challenge with our kids in kids ministry. It's called the Church Crew Challenge. And so kids can earn ping pong balls, basically, if they do certain things. Like, so one of those things, and some of them it's like that spiritual discipline type stuff, but it's bringing their Bible to church. That's one way that they can bring it. And so I told the kids, I said, just bringing your Bible doesn't earn you a ping pong ball. Like, you have to bring it and open it and actually read in it. Like, that's where the difference lies. Like, it's not just bringing it and saying, hey, look, I brought my Bible. Like,
yes,
I'm going to get my ping pong ball. Like, no, it's, hey, I brought my Bible. Where is this? Like, yesterday we were talking about, we were in the book of Luke. And so I said, all right, it's Luke chapter 5. Okay, so I need you to turn to Luke. Does everybody know where Luke is? And so they're like, yeah, I think so. And I was like, all right, well, it's in the New Testament. I said, so let's try to, I'm going to give you a few minutes to find it. So we had like 4 or 5 kids that brought their Bibles second service yesterday. So I waited, gave them their time to like change, to look for that. But that's what I was trying to explain to them. Like, it's not a matter of just bringing your Bible and sticking it in the cubbies in the back. It's a matter of bringing it and actually using it.
Right.
Like, it can't just sit there. You have to actually be able to use it.
Absolutely. I remember when Pastor Scott actually was in charge of youth way back when, and I volunteered for him, I remember sitting there with these teens who did not know how to look up a scripture in their Bible. And I mean, now that we have, like, YouVersion is a wonderful tool, but now that we have that, you just select it on the list and all that. There's not a lot of, like, intuitive memorization type that happens to help teach you how to look it up in the physical
I
Bible.
had a kid ask if counted if they brought their phone. I said, I prefer not.
Yeah.
I prefer you to bring the real thing.
Yeah. And so like, when we were doing Proverbs with our kids, like, I taught them how to look it up in the table of contents table of comments, because that's the easiest way to teach them. So that way they will visually see that order of those books in the Bible. They'll also see that list of what books are in there, because, even to this day, like, one of my favorite things that happened was in one of our creative meetings, one of our newer interns, who's like less than, 5 years in the faith, or about 5 years. We were talking about Nehemiah. We were going to do a series on Nehemiah, and this intern said, what's Nehemiah? And we were like, a book in the Bible.
Yeah.
And it was one of my favorite moments, though, because I think if you've been attending church a long time, or if you've been in that, you forget how much people don't know. Like, we think because we're in America that everybody knows. Like, everybody could quote John 3:16 or that, but people don't. People don't know. Like, still to this day, people don't know how to do those things. People don't know what books are in the Bible, or what stories are in there, or what, like, how it really helps. Like, and that's why this series, I think, is so critical, because the little bit that maybe people do know has been passed down haphazardly or randomly sometimes, or like not at all. Yeah. And they just don't know what they don't know.
So Scott and I have a cousin who grew up in church, and he actually walked away from the faith because when he was in high school, his youth pastor could not answer a question about something. Like, it was like a biblical question, and his youth pastor couldn't answer it. And he thought, well, if this guy who is supposed to teach me can't answer this, like, rough. He must not know like what is going on. And so it's great now, because he's actually come back, he got saved and like rededicated his life, or and he and Scott have had like these really intense conversations. But like, we don't know what we don't know. And so when we are shepherding and pouring into people and discipling people, like they are looking to us for those answers. And when we don't have them, I think even just being open and honest and saying, you know what, I don't necessarily have the answer for that, but I'm going to find it. I'm going to figure it out for you.
I think that makes all the difference.
And so like when we're with our friends and we're talking and we're doing those things and they're like, well, why did this happen? Or why is this going on? And you'd be like, you know what? I don't know why that happened.
Yeah.
But I would love to be able to find that information out for you and get you more information about that.
Well, and I love that because I think one of the things that I said is that reading a passage like what we were in, Matthew 25, sheep and the goats, the least of these passage, should make you think about things and feel a certain way. It should. And that is why like that assessment that got into people who really read their Bible on the regular are more apt to do something with it because they're reading those things and it stirs something within you when you're like, oh yeah, I see that in my world today. I see this kind of same social justice issue happening still today. Like if you're not reading it, because I think some of the best stories in life, when you read it, and you put yourself in the story, it makes it so much better, right? Like fictional books, whatever. That's why they're so great, is because you can pretend to be whatever character in that book and go to a different world. But like the Bible, a lot of things, even though it's a totally different culture and time and all of that, a lot of those things still apply today. It is the living word. And so like a lot of those same issues they struggled with then are still issues today. And so putting yourself in this story, in the Bible story, puts you in your world now. And so it's not an escape. Like, it's not necessarily escape like some people might think, like fairy tales and fantasies and like whatever. They might think, oh, that's all nonsense. It's not, because a lot of that is still going on. And so when you're in it, when you're reading it, it should call those things to mind and stir something within you to want to be better, to do better, to do more, to help in some way. And if it doesn't, are you just reading it to get through the checklist? You know what I mean? But it's not really sinking in. And I think there's time. I think that's why I like it being like a transformational discipleship aspect, is that like in discipleship, you don't like get saved and then all of a sudden like boom. That might happen with some people.
Right.
Okay. I'm not saying that never happens, because I do know that for some people, they get saved, they're freed from addiction instantly. They're freed from all this instant, like it can happen. But for the most of us, it's not always that thing. It's sometimes an intellectual thing, and then it takes time for all the other stuff to
catch up.
And for some of that movement. But it is that trajectory, like that movement. That's why I love, like, it's a movement. It requires like some kind of forward action. And so if there's nothing happening, if you're still the same today as you were 10 years ago when you accepted Christ as your Savior, evaluate that. Like, get in there and just say, okay, what am I not doing? Or what am I doing but not doing in the right way with the right motive behind it? Because some people might do a lot of these things and they want to show it. Because I think that's the biggest thing for us as pastors, as ministry leaders. We do a lot of things. We have a lot of conversations, a lot of showing up, a lot of doing certain things that like we don't put out there and share, because it's not our story to share and put out there. And we're not doing it for that. And so there's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes that nobody knows about. And so that can seem as though, oh, well, they're just up there at the church building all week and they're not really doing anything for people. But we are. And it's just because we don't blast that out there. Like we'll blast the trunk or treats, we'll blast the meal packing, like things like that are big scale. But it is what I said yesterday, like that small scale, that showing up for that individual. That makes all the difference.
So you and I talked about this last week. And for those that don't know this, back in September, I had a cancer scare. And it was awful. It was absolutely awful. But in the midst of that, I reached out to a group of people and I said, I need prayer. Like, I'm overwhelmed. I don't know what to do. Like, I need prayer. And so I had this group of people that came alongside me and were praying and lifting me up. And in the midst of that, a friend of mine reached out and said, hey, there's a chance that I may have breast cancer and I need you. Like, I don't know what to do. I need you to pray. I need you to do this, like, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I've got you. Like, I've got you. I got you. I got you. And then I texted her and I said, when's your appointment? She tells me, and I said, do you want me to come and sit with you? And she's like, no, I'm fine. And I said, okay, again, I'm going to come and sit with you. Like, I'm just going to come and do it. So I literally, like, I told her, I was like, I'm coming. And her husband said, how did Jess get you to, like, agree to this? And she's like, she didn't really. She just told me that she was coming. Like, we found somebody to watch the kids and, like, everything. And so I went and I sat with her in the waiting room of that. Well, last week, I had my second crazy scare. And thought that I was going to be in the same boat that she was just in. And she was the first person that I texted. And she said, when's your appointment? Because I want to come and sit with you. And I said, I'm actually okay. Like, I really am. I'm actually okay. And I said, because I think it's because of everything that I just went through. And I said, but I am okay. And I don't feel like I need to have anybody sit with me right now. And she's like, are you sure? She's like, because I will come and sit with you. But I think it's because of that, like, willingness to say, like, hey, let me come sit with you and you're in the midst of your, trials. So that said to her, hey, now I'm going to come and sit with you in yours. We have to humble ourselves in that. Like, and I will say, like, Pastor Anna and I've talked about this, like, in the midst of all of that in September, and then again, the last 2 weeks, there are times where we, I think, want to put up these walls and not let people in. We don't want people to know what's going on. Like, we don't want people to know that we're struggling, or we don't want people to know that we're having a hard day, or we don't want people to know that, there's this potential, like, diagnoses that's coming in that could be life altering until it actually happens. But, like, in those moments, there's this vulnerability that has to happen that says, I can't do this on my own.
And you said it too, humility, because that will, like, pride will stop you from living in community in the way that God intended us to 100% of the time if we don't tear it down, if we don't humble ourselves. And that's why, like, this series, Pastor Scott said it so many times, like, in a sermon series, it is really one long sermon that's multiple parts, because it's too much for you to take in at one point. And so that's why, like, if you go back to the week of the climate of community, I think was the title of that sermon. If you go back to that, if you're not doing that within the kingdom, this part can't happen.
No.
And that's why I was like, that's why that is so important. That's why the discipleship aspect of it, like the understanding the mission of I am supposed to be discipled and disciple. Like, if you don't understand those things, like, this isn't going to happen. Like, if those things aren't happening, it can't. Because if you're not in community and you don't have at least that one person that you can go to and tell, because that person may not be able to meet the need, but they may know somebody. Absolutely. And that's what I've seen. I think it was several weeks ago that I saw beautiful things like that happen, where one person that goes here, I know, knows a lot of resources within the community of different organizations that do different things. And she was the one that I reached out to say, hey, we have this single mom who needs a car seat still. She's like, she needs it before she can be discharged from the hospital. And she said, you know what? We have funds for that. I can buy it. I can order it for you to pick up, whatever. I was out here working late. So she was like, you know what? We were at Walmart. I'm going to get it right now. I'll drop it off to you. And I'm like, okay. I put it in my car. And what was funny was I had already, that same person helped me get the connection for the toddler bed and a mattress. But, like, I had to get the toddler bed out of my car to put the car seat in my car. And then, like, I mean, it was just a whole thing. But we got those things. And I didn't spend any money except for, like, gas money and time, you know what I mean? But those things are not a big deal to me.
Yeah.
But so, like, I didn't have to pay with my own funds to get the car seat or to get the stroller or any of that other stuff that happened, like, or the toddler mattress. Like, I knew somebody that had connections that I reached out to, but I wouldn't have known any of that had I not been in community and relationship with those people. And so, like, it so matters. And honestly, I didn't know about the car seat thing because I was in contact with that person. It was another person within the church who was in contact with that single mom who said, hey, I just left the hospital. She's in labor. She still doesn't have a car seat. can you reach out? And I was like, yeah. Like,
Yeah.
so it's one of those things that it's, I think we think when like that we have to be the one to do all of it.
Yes.
And it's not necessarily.
Right.
Like, because of the way the community works, because the way the body should work, I think it's a beautiful picture of the body of Christ.
Yeah.
Like, working together. You need the hand just as much as you need the foot. Like, you need
all
all those
working
parts, and they should
together.
all work in
Yeah.
tandem to make things happen,
Yeah.
to meet the needs of people. But it's that community and relationship.
Right. Well, Jesus emphasizes caring for the hungry, the poor, the sick, the imprisoned. Woo, that was close. How can we intentionally create margin in our lives to be able to say yes when those opportunities arise to help others?
Yeah. So one of it's obviously financial. Okay. I won't spend a lot of time there because I do know that there are some people that, like, you are the least of these that need these things. And you're like, well, how can I help? Like, I literally have no margin because I am struggling because I am poor, or I am way in debt, or
Right.
I am, you know what I mean, behind on my bills, like whatever. So, if you are financially blessed to where, like, I'm living above my means, or I like don't even really budget and I go out to eat all the time because it doesn't really matter to us. It's not a consequence. Like, sit down, figure out what you actually need to do and create some margin, set those things aside, whether it's a new savings account or whatever, because you might be that person that somebody else could call on for the financial part of something.
True.
But I mentioned your schedule because I think this is a big one that, like, we tend, especially in our culture, to just be scheduled to the max. And we think because our schedules are full, we don't have time to be there to do the things, to show up at the hospital with somebody, to have a conversation with somebody. I think looking at your schedule is one of those things, but also it may not be that you can take anything off your schedule, but what within your schedule could you invite somebody else into that you're already doing?
Yeah.
I did this past fall during soccer. I had a friend come and sit with me at soccer practice because I was going to be there for an hour and a half, 2 hours. And I didn't have any time in my week, like outside of the soccer time, where I'm just sitting there, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
To be able to meet up with this person. And I said, hey, would you like to come and sit with me at soccer practice on Thursday? And I said, you bring a chair, come hang out with me. I'm just sitting there. Like, so that friend came, brought the chair. We sat there for 2 hours, caught up, talked, like, heard the things she needed prayer for, all that. Like, but that's something that, like, I'm doing that, but it doesn't mean that I have to do that alone.
Right.
Like, and I know, like, there is that aspect of as you're going, there's those parents and stuff, but I'm like, I'm not doing that and ignoring those parents and interacting with them every week or every time. I'm with them enough that, 1 or 2 or 5 times isn't going to be a big deal if I invite. And who's to say that that person won't connect with somebody else, one of those other parents, and make a friendship or a relationship that's going to help them more. And so, like, it's one of those things that I think sometimes, like, I see this with you and Terry. I think that that's a really cool relationship that you guys have built, that sometimes y'all go run errands together, or she's going and has to run errands with the kids, and you're like, hey, well, I'll go with you to help with the kids and help you. And, like, it's those types of things that at some point along the way, because of modern convenience and all of that, we've forgotten that we can invite other people into the things that we're doing, like, and we think that we have to do it all on our own. So maybe your margin looks a little different than what you think, and it's not necessarily taking anything off, but inviting them into. Like, if I cook dinner, I always cook too much food.
Right.
Like, it's just a given. I cook too much food. I have people who live close to me. It's not a big deal to just invite them over for dinner because I already know we're going to have enough because I'm terrible about cooking too much food.
Yep.
And so it's things like that it's like, why don't you just do some of these things? Yes, family time's important, but, like, they are your family too. Like, if you are a part of God's family, if you have accepted Christ, like he says, you are his brothers and sisters, like they're that too. And so that's that family dynamic of, like, thinking, okay, would it be a big deal for me to invite family to dinner? No. I would invite family to dinner anytime. Like, would it be a big deal to invite my sister to sit with me at soccer practice? No.
Right.
Like, so if you look at it in that way, it helps create that space to do those things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I've got one more question for
Okay.
you. It's what do you think is one, and you kind of just hit on this, okay? So what do you think is one step that you could take this week, or that we can take this week, to truly live out the kingdom rather than to just look like we belong?
Yeah. So yeah, I think it would be to sit down and just evaluate what your life and schedule looks like on a typical week, what you're spending your money on, what you're spending your time on. How can you do those things? That's one thing. But the other thing that I would like to say is to just honestly take some time in prayer this week and say, God, help me notice things.
Yeah.
Like, I am really bad. This is kind of a funny thing about me, but I am really bad about being in the zone when I'm doing stuff, to where, like, I won't notice people around me. If I go to the store and I know what I'm getting and what I'm just going, I'm seeing that there are people there, but I'm not really noticing. And I can't tell you how many people I've walked past and they've yelled at me because they're people from church, and they're like, hey, and I turn around because I've already walked by them and not said a word because I'm in the mode of what I need to do. So just ask God, hey, can you help me notice people?
Yeah.
Like, help me see. Open my eyes first, then open my heart to it.
Yeah.
Because we might see and we might think, well, I can't do anything for that. Like, I don't have the money. I don't have the time. Open my heart, because as we've said, it may not be you, but you might be able to connect somebody to
You may
them.
know the person that can do it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then open my hands, because maybe it is me. Like, maybe I do need to say, okay, I do have a little bit of money, or I do have a toddler bed that I can give, or I do, like, you know what I mean? Like, eyes, heart, hands.
Yeah.
Just spend some time, say that prayer every day. Like, God, open my eyes to see, open my heart to do, and my hands to give.
Yeah.
And watch God work.
Yeah.
Because if you're praying for that, He's going to say, okay, you're taking the effort to speak to me on this. I might trust you with this, and I'll let you see.
Yeah.
And then you'll see these little things. And I think that when we remember that those little things really matter big to people, it'll make us want to do it more. Because I think we just,
and there's so
we
many,
don't think of those
like,
things.
No. And I think that there's in that too. I think that there are so many creative ways that we can do that. Like, I was sharing yesterday with staff. Like, it was really cool. I got a card yesterday from some kids that come here. And they're kids, okay? Kids. Let me just preface by saying that. And they had gone out with their mom, and they were Instacarting with their mom, and decided that they wanted to donate all of their tips to the missions trip to Ecuador. These are kids. They didn't have any of that. That's their mom's Instacarting stuff. But, like, that was their idea to any tips that they got on Saturday. They were going to donate to my trip.
Yeah.
And when I tell you that, like, that, like, touched me. Like, I was shaking as I was, like, looking at that stuff. But it was like, wow, like, that was so cool. Like, and I don't know that whole situation. You know what I mean? But, like, what I do know is that they gave from something that they were doing. Not, I mean, that's so cool. Like, these are kids that decided, hey, we're gonna do this, and we're gonna give what's not necessarily ours to give. You know what I mean? But, like, that was a family decision to be like, hey, we're gonna give this.
Yeah, and I think that's what, like, this week was the method of the kingdom.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really great point, Pastor Jess, because how you do it can look different.
Yeah.
But the point is that you do it.
That you do it. Yeah, absolutely. Well, this message has definitely challenged us. And so my challenge for you is that if someone looked closely at your life, would they see an outward evidence of an inward faith? And how can you assess that this week? We want to thank you for joining us on our Extra Point podcast, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to The Extra Point. Be sure to subscribe to the Southridge Church podcast and tune in every Wednesday for another episode of The Extra Point.